When my parents passed away within months of each other, I thought grief would be the hardest part. I imagined that losing them would be the final heartbreak, the one that would leave me hollow but somehow free to start again. I was wrong. The real pain began the day I sat in that polished oak-floored office, surrounded by fake condolences and even faker smiles. My brother Jonathan and sister Claire were already there when I arrived, their designer clothes a loud contrast to my simple black dress. Jonathan leaned against the wall, scrolling through his phone, while Claire adjusted her pearl necklace and glanced at me with that familiar mix of superiority and disdain. She didn't need to speak. Her smirk said everything. She had already decided what belonged to her. The lawyer, a tall man with thinning hair and the kind of detached sympathy only money could buy, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. I'll begin reading the will." His voice echoed through the room, steady and unbothered, as if this was just another transaction, another family torn open by paper and signatures. I sat there gripping the armrest, waiting to hear my name. My heart thudded in rhythm with every word, every pause, every page turned. When he finally reached the section dividing the estate, my breath caught. "To Jonathan and Claire," he read, "we leave our home, our savings, and all family possessions." My name didn't follow. My stomach turned cold. I waited. Surely there was a mistake, an addendum, something. But then he flipped to the last page and said, "To Emma, our youngest, we leave a small box, stored in the attic." A box. That was it. The silence afterward was sharp. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, his lips twisting into a pitying smile. "Guess you got the sentimental stuff, Em," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. Claire let out a small, rehearsed laugh. "Maybe it's one of Mom's old recipe boxes. You always liked her cooking." Their voices felt distant, muffled by the roaring in my ears. I didn't say a word. The lawyer avoided my gaze, closing the folder and clearing his throat again. "That concludes the will." He shuffled his papers and the meeting was over, just like that. Years of family history, love and sacrifice, all reduced to lines of ink and legal stamps. I walked out of the office numb. The sun outside was blinding, too bright for a day that felt so dark. As I passed the glass window, I saw my reflection, tearless, motionless, hollow. I had always known my siblings saw me as the quiet one, the afterthought, but to think my parents did too. It was a wound deeper than death itself. When I got home, the house felt different. It wasn't really mine anymore. Technically, it belonged to Jonathan and Claire now. Every corner whispered of memories I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. The laughter during Christmas dinners, my mother's soft singing while she cooked, my father's low hum when he read by the fireplace. I'll ghost now. I didn't unpack. I didn't eat. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor until night fell. The thought of that box wouldn't leave me. What could be inside? Why only that? Curiosity wrestled with resentment, and by midnight, I found myself climbing the creaky stairs to the attic. The air grew colder with each step. The faint light from a single bulb swung gently, throwing shifting shadows across the dust-covered floor. My parents' belongings were still there. Old furniture, boxes labeled in my father's handwriting, and stacks of forgotten books. Then, in the far corner, half hidden under a yellowed quilt, I saw it, a small wooden box. It was plain yet strangely dignified, with my name Emma carved delicately on the lid, as if by my father's careful hands. I knelt beside it, brushing off the dust, my fingers trembling. For a long time I just stared, afraid of what opening it might mean, afraid of finding nothing, or worse, something I couldn't unsee. Finally, I lifted the lid. Inside were a few folded letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, a worn photograph, and a small brass key. No jewelry, no deeds, no hidden fortune. Just these quiet remnants. I held the photograph first. It was of my parents, younger, standing in front of the old house with me as a toddler between them. My father's arm rested around my mother's shoulder. Their smiles were genuine, unguarded. I had almost forgotten they used to look at me like that, with pride, with love. Then I untied the ribbon around the letters. The first one was written in my mother's handwriting, soft, looping, unmistakable. My breath hitched as I read the opening line. "If you're reading this, Emma, then they've already told you lies." My pulse quickened. Lies? What lies? My mother wasn't the kind of woman who used words carelessly. I flipped the letter over, reading the next lines, but it stopped abruptly, as if the rest had been torn or hidden. My heart raced as my eyes darted to the next envelope, still sealed. The brass key glinted under the weak attic light. It wasn't new. The metal had aged, its edges smoothed by time. I turned it over in my palm, wondering what it opened. A drawer? A safe? A door? I sat there in the attic for what felt like hours, surrounded by silence and dust, clutching that box like it held the last pieces of my soul. Every childhood memory replayed in flashes. The times my parents defended Jonathan and Claire. The times they told me I was too emotional, too distant, too soft. I had always blamed myself for being the odd one out, the quiet daughter who never quite fit their expectations. But what if it hadn't been my fault? What if the lies my mother mentioned had shaped everything? I thought of the last time I spoke to her. It was months before she passed. She'd sounded tired, her voice distant, yet warm. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart," she said. "You have a good heart. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." I never knew those words would be the last thing she'd say to me. Now they echoed like a warning. I opened the second letter, written in my father's firm, angular handwriting. It was brief, almost cryptic. "Keep this box safe, Emma. The truth will find you when you're ready. Don't trust what they say. Remember what you know." Tears filled my eyes. My father had never been an emotional man, never one for sentiment. For him to write something like that, something so deliberate, it meant this wasn't just about money or property. It was about something deeper, something they'd tried to protect me from. I looked at the photograph again and noticed something odd I hadn't seen before. In the corner of the image, barely visible, was the outline of another object. A safe, built into the wall behind my father's chair. I remembered it vaguely from my childhood. He used to tell us never to touch it, saying it was where he kept private things. Back then, I thought it meant old papers or taxes. But now, holding the brass key, I wasn't so sure. The realization struck like lightning. The key might belong to that safe. My heart pounded as I imagined what could be inside. Maybe documents, letters, proof of something. But proof of what? Lies about what? The attic light flickered, snapping me back to the present. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the old hallway clock. I could almost hear my parents' voices blending into the stillness, whispering secrets through the walls. As I closed the box and held it to my chest, a strange calm washed over me. I didn't feel powerless anymore. For the first time since the will reading, I felt chosen. Whatever my parents had hidden, whatever they had wanted me to find, was meant for me and me alone. I took the box downstairs and placed it carefully on the nightstand beside my bed. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind swirled with fragments of conversations, half-remembered moments, and the unanswered question that kept pulsing through me. What lies? The next morning, I woke up with one thought burning in my mind. I was going to find out. I looked at the wooden box again. To anyone else, it might seem worthless, but to me, it was everything. It was a thread leading back to the truth. The kind of truth that destroys illusions but sets you free. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through my window, I whispered to myself, "You didn't leave me anything. Mom, you left me a key." And I knew, whatever was hidden behind that small brass key would change everything I thought I knew about my family. Everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and inheritance was about to unravel. Because sometimes, the smallest box holds the biggest secret. And sometimes, what we inherit isn't money or property, it's the truth they tried to bury, and I was ready to unearth it. The next morning, I woke up to a strange kind of silence, the kind that hangs heavy before a storm. The wooden box still sat on my nightstand, small and unassuming. but it felt like the entire weight of my family's history was locked inside it. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, landing on the brass key that glinted faintly, as if it were calling out to me. I ran my fingers over it again, feeling its cool surface, and the echo of my father's handwriting played over and over in my mind. "Keep this box safe, Emma. The truth will find you when you're ready." For the first time, I realized what that meant. I wasn't just ready. I needed to know everything. I spread the letters out on my bed, reading and rereading them until the ink felt etched into my skin. There were 4 in total, each written on the same stationery, faded cream paper, my mother's perfume lingering faintly like a ghost. The first one I'd already read, the one that warned me of lies. The second letter began more softly, almost lovingly. "My sweet girl, you were always the kindest. Maybe that's why they thought they could twist your kindness into weakness." I paused at that line, the words piercing like a knife. My mother had seen it. She had known how easily Jonathan and Claire could turn gentleness into something to be exploited. As I continued reading, her tone shifted. The warmth gave way to guilt. "I didn't question them when they said you didn't want to come home. They told me you were distant, that you'd found new friends and didn't care anymore. I believed them. I thought, maybe you were happier away from us, but I see now they were the ones who wanted you gone." I pressed the paper to my chest, my throat tightening. Memories surfaced. Phone calls that went unanswered, invitations that never came, birthdays I spent alone in a different city. Back then, I thought my parents had stopped caring. But now, I realized those were the years Jonathan and Claire had been tightening their hold. My mother had always been fragile in her later years, her health fading while my father tried to keep the family afloat. Jonathan, the eldest, was the golden son, the one who understood business. Claire, the middle child, was charming, persuasive, and cruel in ways she disguised as honesty. Together, they'd painted me as the emotional one, the unstable one, the disappointment, and I had believed it. I had walked away quietly, thinking that was what they all wanted. Now, every memory felt like a puzzle piece that suddenly fit. Every cold glance at family dinners, every time Claire said, "Mom worries about you," or Jonathan told me, "You just make things harder for everyone." It was all manipulation, a carefully built illusion. Then I noticed something at the bottom of the last letter, my mother's signature, followed by a sentence that made my heart pound. "The key belongs to your father's study." Look behind the painting, the key, the study. The painting. It felt like a whisper from beyond, urging me forward. I grabbed my sweater and walked through the hallway of the old house. Dust particles danced in the morning light. My footsteps echoed against the wooden floorboards as I passed the familiar rooms, the kitchen where my mother used to hum, the sitting room where Jonathan now kept his whiskey glasses, the hallway lined with framed family portraits that suddenly looked like lies frozen in gold frames. The study door creaked as I pushed it open. My father's scent still lingered, old books, tobacco, and varnished wood. Everything looked untouched, as if he might walk in at any moment. His desk sat neatly by the window, covered with a layer of dust but still organized. Pen holder, magnifying glass, a small globe, stacks of paper. The air was thick, heavy with secrets. My gaze fell on the large family portrait hanging above the fireplace, the same one from the photograph in the box. My parents stood side by side, Jonathan and Claire in front, and me slightly off to the side, almost fading into the background. It had always bothered me, even when I was a child, how I wasn't centered. But now it didn't matter. My father had hidden something behind it. I stepped closer, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I lifted the frame carefully. It was heavier than I expected, and as I tilted it forward, I saw it. A faint outline, a small rectangular panel cut neatly into the wall. My breath caught. My hands trembled as I inserted the brass key. It fit perfectly, clicking open with a soft metallic sound. Inside was a small safe. My fingers brushed over folders, tapes, and handwritten notes. I pulled everything out, spreading it on the desk. There were bank statements, property documents, and a flash drive labeled Private for Emma. My pulse quickened. I connected it to my laptop, half afraid of what I was about to see. The screen flickered, and a video appeared. My father sat in his chair looking older and more tired than I remembered, but his eyes, those kind, stern eyes, were steady. He spoke directly to the camera. "If you're seeing this, it means you've found the box," he said. His voice was calm but heavy. "Your mother and I feared this might happen. Jonathan and Claire? They've changed. They convinced us you didn't care, Emma. They made us believe you'd turned your back on us. But I know my daughter. I know your heart. And I know you would never abandon your family. So I've kept records. Every account, every signature, every transaction they tried to hide. One day you'll need them. And when that day comes, you'll know what to do." Tears blurred my vision. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle the sob that broke loose. My father had known. He had known, and still, he'd tried to protect me from the shadows my siblings cast. I spent the next several hours going through everything. The documents revealed a trail of deceit that spanned years. There were signatures, my father's except not quite. The loops and lines looked off, stiffer, clumsier. My brother had forged them. There were bank transfers from my parents' joint account to Claire's personal one, labeled as care expenses or investments. There were emails printed out, showing how they had manipulated my parents into signing over property rights while they were both in declining health. Every piece of paper was another knife twist. I thought of my parents' final days, how Jonathan had been the one handling their medical arrangements, how Claire had insisted on helping with the paperwork. They had smiled through it all, pretending to be devoted children. I had believed them. The room felt colder. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered, "How could you do this?" But there was no answer, only the soft ticking of the clock above the mantel. I didn't know what to do next. A part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to throw the truth in their faces. But another part, the part that still heard my father's calm voice in that recording, knew I had to be careful. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was fraud, theft, betrayal on a level I hadn't even imagined. I gathered all the evidence into a folder. My hands shook, but my mind was clear. I wasn't going to be the silent one anymore. The following morning, I went straight to the lawyer's office. He looked surprised to see me. "Emma? I wasn't expecting you." "I found something," I said quietly, setting the folder on his desk. He opened it, his brow furrowing as he flipped through the papers. I watched the shift in his expression, from curiosity to confusion to shock. "Emma," he finally said, voice low, "this changes everything." I swallowed hard. I thought I inherited nothing. But it looks like I inherited the truth. He nodded slowly. "These are serious accusations. With this kind of proof, the will could be challenged. Your siblings could face charges if the forgery is verified." I sat there, my heart pounding but steady. "I don't want revenge," I said, though part of me did. "I just want what's right." He nodded again, understanding. "Then we'll start there." As I walked out of his office, I felt a strange lightness. Not joy, just release. For years, I'd carried the shame of being the unwanted child, the outsider. But now I saw it clearly. I wasn't unwanted. I was inconvenienced. I was the one person they couldn't manipulate. The lies that had shaped my family were beginning to unravel, one truth at a time. And for the first time, I didn't feel small or forgotten. I felt powerful, not because I had money or property, but because I had proof. Because I held the truth in my hands. As I walked down the sunlit street, clutching the folder close to my chest, I realized something my parents had tried to teach me all along. Sometimes, the smallest inheritance isn't gold or land. It's the courage to face what others hide. And I was finally ready to face it. The confrontation came sooner than I expected, but not in the explosive way I had imagined. It was quiet, eerily so, like the calm before a storm that had been brewing for years. The lawyer had called us all back under the pretense of finalizing estate details. Jonathan and Claire walked into the office like they owned the place, their confidence almost theatrical. Jonathan wore his usual smug grin, tapping his fingers on the table, while Claire looked impatient, scrolling through her phone as though even this meeting was a nuisance. I sat across from them, clutching the folder that had changed everything. My palms were damp, my heartbeat steady but hard. I wasn't here as their little sister anymore. I was here as the truth they had tried to bury. The lawyer entered, setting down a new stack of files. His expression was unreadable. "Thank you all for coming," he said calmly, adjusting his glasses. "Before we proceed, there's been a development." Jonathan frowned. "What kind of development?" "I thought everything was already settled." Claire sighed. "Can we just sign whatever's left? Some of us have lives to get back to." The lawyer's gaze flicked to me. "This concerns your sister," he said. "Emma has brought forward new evidence that affects the validity of your parents' will." The words seemed to hang in the air. Claire's phone froze mid-scroll. Jonathan leaned back, his smirk faltering. "Evidence?" he repeated, his tone sharp. "What evidence could she possibly have?" The lawyer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened the folder I had given him days earlier and spread the documents across the table. Bank statements, signed letters, copies of forged signatures, and finally, a printed transcript of my father's recorded message. "This is proof," I said quietly, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Proof that you both lied, forged documents, and manipulated our parents while they were sick." Jonathan laughed, but it was brittle. "You can't be serious," he said, glancing at the lawyer. "These could be fake. Anyone can make copies of signatures." His voice rose an octave, nervous now. "Do you even have any idea what you're accusing us of?" I didn't respond. Instead, I reached into my bag and placed the flash drive on the table. "Play it," I told the lawyer. He inserted it into his laptop. The room filled with static for a second. Then my father's voice came through, weary but unmistakable. "If you're hearing this, it means Emma found the truth," he said. "Protect her. She's the only honest one left." Silence fell. I could hear Claire's sharp intake of breath, the tremble she tried to hide. Jonathan's face turned pale, his jaw tightening as he stared at the floor. The lawyer paused the recording and looked up. "This voice has been verified as your father's," he said evenly. "Combined with the financial inconsistencies and handwriting analysis, there's substantial evidence that the will was altered under duress or deception." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Claire snapped. "You're just trying to make yourself look like the victim again, aren't you, Emma?" "You always do this. You can't stand not being the center of attention." Her voice cracked midway through the sentence, revealing the fear beneath the anger. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something. The power she used to have over me, the years of making me feel small, weak, invisible, had vanished. Her words no longer cut. They only sounded desperate. "I don't need attention, Claire," I said softly. "I just need the truth to be seen." Jonathan stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "This is ridiculous. You have no right to drag our names through the mud like this. Mom and Dad trusted me to handle things." I met his glare. "They trusted you, and you betrayed that trust. You took everything, not just the money, but the love they had for all of us." "You poisoned it," the lawyer interjected, his tone firm now. "Enough. Mr. and Ms. Collins, given this evidence, the court will likely rule in Emma's favor pending a formal investigation. I'd advise both of you to cooperate fully." Claire sank into her chair, silent. Jonathan clenched his fists but said nothing more. For the first time, he looked uncertain, smaller somehow. The arrogance he wore like armor had cracked, revealing the guilt beneath. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just sat there, feeling both empty and full at the same time. Empty because the victory didn't bring back the family I'd lost, but full because I had finally reclaimed the piece of myself they'd tried to destroy. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Legal terms, signatures, acknowledgments, none of it mattered anymore. When it was over, I walked out into the cold air, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. I looked up at the sky, the winter sun breaking through the clouds, and whispered, "I did it, Mom. I found the truth." Over the next few weeks, the investigation unfolded quietly. The handwriting experts confirmed the forgeries. The bank confirmed the transfers. My siblings tried to stall, to deflect blame onto each other, but it was useless. The truth had been written in ink long before I ever found the box. It just needed someone brave enough to open it. In the end, the will was overturned. The estate was redivided according to the original terms my parents had signed before they were manipulated. The lawyer congratulated me gently, saying, "Justice was slow, but it came." I smiled, but it was faint. "Justice doesn't bring people back," I said. "It just lets them rest." I used part of my inheritance not to rebuild the house or buy something extravagant, but to restore the small family library my father had loved. I repaired the shelves, cleaned the dust off the old books, and placed the wooden box on the top shelf. Inside, I kept the letters, the photograph, and now a new note I wrote to myself on simple paper. "You didn't lose your family. You found the truth they tried to bury." Sometimes when I walk past the bookshelf, I pause to run my hand over that box. I used to think it was empty of value. Now I understand it contained everything that mattered: love, courage, truth, and the quiet power to stand up for myself. Jonathan and Claire eventually disappeared from my life. They didn't apologize, not really. There were awkward messages from lawyers, attempts to settle privately, but I refused. Some wounds don't need closure from the people who caused them. They just need time and truth. Months later, I visited my parents' graves for the first time since the ordeal. The air was crisp, the leaves rustling softly in the wind. I knelt between their headstones, holding the photograph I'd found in the box, the one where we were all smiling, unaware of the years that would separate us. "I used to think you left me nothing," I whispered, "but you left me everything I needed to find my way back." A breeze passed through, stirring the grass, and for a fleeting moment, I felt it, a warmth on my shoulder, gentle and familiar. Maybe it was the sun. Maybe it was them. Either way, I smiled through my tears. When I walked away that day, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter anymore. I felt like the woman my parents had raised me to be. Quiet, yes, but strong. Not vengeful, but resolute. Someone who understood that truth, though painful, is the most valuable inheritance of all. The box remains on my shelf to this day, a simple reminder of the past and a symbol of everything I overcame. I don't look at it with sadness anymore. Instead, I see it as proof that even in the smallest, most unexpected places, redemption can hide. That love can survive even betrayal, because in the end, I didn't just uncover their lies, I rediscovered myself. And that was worth more than any inheritance ever could be.